Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Mustafa, and in this video I'm going to tell you how it came about that I started down the path of Islam. I will say that I was born and raised in Michigan. I was raised a Christian, baptized, Catholic, first communion, confession, confirmation, all that. And that's the way I went along for years. Once I went into the military, things started to change for me afterward. I started going to school. I went back to college and I started to get interested in a few things. And that's where I met people that weren't Catholic in South Alabama. They were Baptists. And it seemed like they had a pretty good thing going there. So I made friends with one of my instructors, and he happened to be a Baptist pastor, and I started going to his church. Somewhere along the line, after many years of going to this church and this Baptist church and back to that church, it was always because there was such a struggle within the church. I mean, people were always fighting, arguing, and fussing, and asking the pastor to leave, and all kinds of crazy stuff was going on. I would leave and I would go to the next church, and that one would be pretty much the same, and then I would leave and go to the next one. And, I don't know why, somewhere along the way I figured I had the call to the ministry, and I was going to do this sort of thing, knowing all the problems that could arise from it, knowing if you're pastoring a small church from, say, to 100 people, you're just about, if you got a family, you're just about living in poverty. They don't pay enough to, they always come out with, well, they could do better maybe in your salary wise, but they always come out with, well, you're just part-time, a part-time pastor, which means that you got to get a job to make up the difference. Now, when you're like myself and you went to school for so many years, and you're not paid a real decent salary, a livable salary, and you're doing all kinds of things at all hours of the day and night for, the church, somebody's sick, or somebody's in the hospital, or somebody dies, or you got to go visit somebody because they're mad, or you got to go and try to find new people to come to church. I mean, it's a full-time job, even though it's part-time pay. So I went through that for a number of years, through several churches. In fact, one church I was a youth minister and associate pastor. Now there was different ways to say that. If it was assistant pastor or associate pastor, I think he wanted to say associate because it was like a dual pastor in that church. You see, if you'd have said assistant, I would have been under him totally and not been able to make many decisions on my own. So anyway, I was associate pastor and youth minister, found a church of my own, was doing some pulpit supply. Now, pulpit supply for Southern Baptists is that you find a church that's available, and they need a preacher, not a pastor, but they need a preacher for Sunday morning because they don't have one. Well, you would go over there and you would preach at that church Sunday morning. And it was through this operation right here that I actually got the pastorate that I stayed in for about 4 years. Well, about 3.5 years. And I was senior pastor at that church. But like I say, they considered it part-time. Even though they had resources to do better, they just wanted to put the money in a building program instead of investing in the pastor of the church. Which, that was the thing. If you didn't like it, you could leave. That's the way it is. So I struggled. I struggled a lot. I struggled with watching the things going on inside the church. Man, it was steady chaos. It was steady confusion and chaos. I had about 6 deacons in that church, and they were all family members. Their family were, they were the biggest families in the church. So the grandfather, father/father were deacons, and they just about literally controlled things. I mean, you weren't the pastor really. You weren't up for making decisions on your own. These guys would kind of set the choices for you, And I knew that wasn't the way it was supposed to be, but that's the way it was. And like I said, if you didn't like it, you could leave. And this very year that I entered that ministry, they had, I think, four pastors before me. I think 3 of them they called, and one was just like an interim, the last one. But I think they called 3 of them, and he got involved in some of the messes that were going on in the church. And I mean, there were some real ones, anywhere from, well, I maybe shouldn't get into what they were doing, but I mean, some serious things were going on. And they got fired. I mean, they were asked to leave, and they were voted on to leave. So that's the way it was there. And I wanted to get out of that as soon as I could, and I went up to Michigan, and I preached at a few churches, and I think one was going to call me, but I couldn't wait around. I couldn't stay another week until they mustered all the folks that are members of that church so they could come and hear me. So, I had to leave, and I had to go back south, and I had to preach on that Sunday. So, I just couldn't stay, but I couldn't get out of it, it seemed like. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take it any longer. It was a combination. It was the big bills I had, the low income coming in, the inability to work and function in that church, and if you didn't do certain things, you were going to be probably asked to leave. So, I mean, it was a thing. It was a big snowball rolling down the hill. All these things were adding up, and I got in my mind. I always drove a truck, so I'll go back driving a truck, and that's what I did. And I drove a truck for a number of years, and then bought a truck and drove it for a number of years, and that's the way it went for me. And I was really lucky. I was really blessed, but my spiritual life was stagnant, and that's the way it remained for a long time. So about 2018, I got the idea, and I was doing a lot of study before that Islam seemed like a pretty rational religion. No matter what they said about it on TV, that just sparked my curiosity. So I started to study, and I started to do a self-study, and I did that for probably 2017. All of 2017 I did that. 2018 I started going to a local mosque, and they didn't have an imam there, so it was kind of like somebody would do the khutbah on Friday, whoever it was. And I wanted to take the Shahada. And then the Shahada, if you don't know what that is, that's the Islamic profession of faith. And it's like the Christian, would profess their belief in God and belief in Jesus. Well, this is about the same. So I wanted to take the Shahada. They didn't have nobody there that could give me the Shahada, believe it or not. That was the strangest thing I ever seen, because there were Muslims, some of them in there for life, and surely they could have led me in a Shahada. But I wound up going with I think the vice president or the treasury, the guy who was in charge of the treasury. We went to another mosque that did have an imam, and he gave me the Shahada, and I got a film of that. So anyway, it was an interesting progression through there, and a lot of the things that were in Christianity were just crazy, strange things. I often questioned some of the verses in the Bible, at that time that I was a pastor, and I said, man, it's hard to believe God said these things. And we're going to get into some of these later on in my boot camp series, but it's hard to believe God said some of these things. They were so crazy and so outlandish. I mean, I just couldn't see God saying that. I could see some guy sitting down and writing that who maybe had an axe to grind or an agenda, but as far as God saying it, it was a little ridiculous. And we're going to see some of those verses. I got to show them to you, because this is some of the things that in my mind, as I'm thinking about becoming a Muslim, these things are going on in my mind. And I said, you know what? I said, this is more reasonable to me. And started reading, before that, like I said, I read the Quran. would listen to the Quran on tape. There was various versions of the Quran that I would listen to. English versions. There's only one Arabic version, but there's many English versions that they try to make it more understandable for, the Anglo, the English, So I was doing that for a while. Took my Shahada. Then I started to say, well, I want more knowledge, and I did take a course at a mosque, and it was offered. I got a flyer for it. I think I got it maybe from where I took the Shahada. I picked it up, and they were going to have a beginner's course in Islam, and I was interested in that. It was Abdul Azim who was going to teach it, Sheikh Azim, and he's the imam of the, I think it's just a Mineola Mosque. He was teaching this course to me. He also teaches one in Arabic. I think it's Medina Arabic course or something like that. It was a good course. The problem of it was we used this book right here. I'll show it to you. It's Islam, Beliefs and Teachings. Now this is in its 7th printing. And the book was really terrible in some places, and you wonder why. If you look at the back of the book, the guy is a director of Muslim education, of a Muslim educational trust. He's got a degree in commerce and a master's in business management. Now, you stop and think, how in the world does that qualify him to produce a book on basic Islam? And he says some things in here that, are questionable to say the least, but yet this book keeps getting reprinted and reprinted and reprinted, and people go for it. And it's got, like I said, a lot of, in the class, we came up with some questions, and Sheikh said, well, that's questionable. A lot of things in this book are questionable. So it's not, I wouldn't recommend it, but I don't know if you can see it or not, right there. But people are biting on it, they're buying it, and we used it. I don't know if they're going to use it again over there. So after all that, I took the basic Introduction to Islam 1 from their school. And then I decided, well, that wasn't enough. I didn't have enough. Self-study for a year, another year in the school, and I decided, well, I'm going to now I'm going to take in, I'm going to study at IOU. And I went and got a general diploma in Islamic studies from IOU. And if you watch my introduction, you'll see that I show them all. No baloney there. I show every degree, every diploma. And that was about a year. And I think it was about, I'm trying to say it was about 26 some classes. And it took about a year to complete, and you could probably rush through it. But I wanted to get something out of it. So I took about a year to complete that and receive my diploma. I'm still in the process of study. I don't care where you are at in Islam, you're always going to be in the process of study. Just like if you were Baptist, you got training unions and Sunday school, and you got all these things, these tools that you can study with. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. You want to improve your, and we call it the deen, your practice. You want to improve that, you got to study. You can't do it. You're not a flower where you can go and water it once a week and it grows. You're not. You got to study if you want to grow. You have any growth at all. So this is where I'm at. I'm studying. I'm producing these videos. But you notice my videos are not necessarily on Islam. They're on Christianity. I'm going through the scriptures. Okay? That's where my expertise is at. A year diploma, a general diploma in Islamic studies doesn't qualify me to, teach in Medina. I'm just kidding. You know what I'm saying? It's just not enough. But am I more knowledgeable than the average person? I'll tell you what. I'm more knowledgeable than this guy. I'd throw this book away, really. I don't know why I keep it. It's just, I guess, because I went through it. But anyway, you gotta study. Study, study, study. And that's where I was at with this thing. A lot of my Baptist friends, I want to tell you about this. a lot of them wonder what in the world had happened to this guy that he's now a Muslim. You know, how in the world could he get so confused? That's what they say. You know, how could he be so confused? He knows the Bible. How could he? Well, that brings me to the last point of this. I found so many things in the Bible that were so ridiculous, so unbelievable, so many errors and mistakes, so many contradictions, and I know there's people out there that are producing a lot of videos and a lot of things, and what they're doing is they're whitewashing all this stuff, you know, and trying to explain it away. But if you read it just plain and simple in the English, which is a representation of the Greek, and most people don't read Greek, you know, you got to trust the scholars. This book right here is the King James Version, and what, 40 scholars? 40 scholars from I don't know how many different denominations sat down and said, okay, this is the way we should translate that. That's the translators. So it's not like one guy did it and he did it because that's what he believes and he wants to promote what he believed. 40 translators. I imagine there were a lot of arguments during the translation of anything, you know what I'm saying? Or transliteration of anything. But anyway, you know, we come so far by faith. We have faith in what we believe. I always like to say we need evidence as well. And sometimes that's lacking, and people just go on things by faith, and you can really make a mistake doing that. Trust me. So this is a long progression. This is from, you know, my early birth and youth up until about probably 20 years old, you know, in Catholicism. And then some wandering, a lot of wandering after that. And, you know, just a lot of problems. I don't know if you're a Baptist and you're watching this, you know, pastors get burned out. And that's what they call it. I guess they call it burned out. But what he is, he's just fed up. He's fed up with you guys. You know what I'm saying? He's not burned out. He's fed up with watching the baloney that's going on and unable to do anything about it because he's fearing for his job. You know, he's got the car payment. He's got the kids to support. He's got the house. He's got all these things that he's got to pay the bills. So he's not saying nothing. How many of them sitting there? I know they had 52 pastors in the Baldwin Baptist Association I belong to in Baldwin, Alabama. I mean, in South Alabama, Baldwin County. They had 52 pastors there from the various churches around the area. And I guarantee you, only a few of them had nerve enough to speak up about anything. Man, if you would listen to their sermons on Sunday morning, they're greasing the skids. Oh, thanks for so-and-so. Thanks to this one. Thanks to that one. You got 15 minutes of thanks to everybody that did everything but take the garbage out. You know what I'm saying? And they like that. The people sitting there, they like to hear that. You know, they'd rather hear that than probably the message. But, you know, I call that greasing the skids. You know, and is that what we come to? Is this what church has come to? Well, I tell you what, it's what Christianity and Southern Baptist Associational churches has come to. So I said, I want out of that. You know, I'm done with that. No more of that. And just left. Even though I didn't have another church to go to, I just left because it was better for me to leave than for me to stay and do things that I knew were wrong, but just wouldn't say anything about. Okay, so now we're up to the present time, and here we are, we're making videos. Most of my videos are going to be tailored to the Christian point of view, and Muslims can learn a lot from them because you're going to learn what Christians believe, and that's going to help you beyond belief when you go to talk to a Christian. You're going to know what they believe.